This is Wake Up and Lead, a daily podcast where ambitious young professionals learn to lead themselves. Today, we're talking about fitness, and I will be sharing why you hate running. Now, if you are listening to this and you're a big runner and you're good at it, maybe you want to get into lifting or maybe you want to build muscle, the principle I'm about to share will apply to that. It actually will apply to anything that you haven't really been able to get into. But if you're into running and you don't want to learn about learning any other fitness stuff, then maybe you can just come back tomorrow, or you can pat yourself on the back as I share this with you. So a lot of people, what I've found, a lot of people have running trauma, where, it was their punishment. If you played like football or baseball or soccer or basketball, like it was your punishment. And so you're like, oh, running's terrible. Like running just for running. I can run in a sport, but running itself is horrible. In my case, my running trauma was I played soccer and ran track, and speed is probably physically the thing I've been gifted with the most, but I had to ditch my ego because now I weigh a lot more by choice because I lift a lot of weights. And so I'm going to be slower than I was in high school. I was pretty fast at like the 800 and mile and really like middle distance stuff. And so early on when I started running again, from like an aerobic standpoint, was just not nearly where I was in high school, but also I weighed more. And so it was harder to run that fast. So after a couple of years off, mostly throughout college, I was like, you know what, this isn't like my sport. No one's asking me to be elite at this. I want to do this because it's fun and it's good for me. And the only way to make it fun, and you might be thinking there's no way I could ever make it fun, is by starting small. With any habit you're building in your life, if you don't start small enough, you won't be able to do it. And so what I would challenge you to do is, like, if running deep down is something that you might have a desire to do, or you see friends running like half marathons and you're like, how on earth did they do that? I would challenge you to say, you know what? I'm going to run a half mile a day, 5 days a week for this month. And I guarantee you before the month's over, you'll already start increasing that half mile. And by the way, if you go out and sprint it, then I'm going to punch you in the face. Not actually, but that's the other thing. People don't start small enough with the distance and the speed with which they run. By the way, most elite runners spend most of their training in what's called zone 2. And I'm not going to get into all the details of that, but that basically means that they're running very slow. I think a lot of times people say, okay, I'm just going to go out and run really hard for 2 miles, and then you feel horrible after. So if you do get the running bug eventually, which I'll talk more about that in a minute, and you start training for, let's say, a 10K or a half marathon or a marathon, what most people do wrong is they run their slow runs too fast and they run their fast runs too slow. And they just kind of stay somewhere in the middle and there's no intention behind what they do. When you are training for something, a lot of your runs should be almost in like the effortless bucket. And you right now, if you're starting from nothing, you're probably like, effortless running? Are you kidding me? Just hear me say this. If you want to get into running, say I'm going to start running a half mile or a mile, and I'm literally running it at like 10 to 11 minute per mile pace if you've never run before. And if you were just lightly jogging and you don't feel like you have to run super far or you don't feel like you have to run super hard, if you do that over time, you will get in way better shape and you'll all of a sudden start feeling better. And then you can build up the habit of learning to run. Anybody that you see that runs a half marathon, unless they're just like a freak, which, yeah, there are some of those people, but a lot of those people maybe were overweight at some point or they never ran, but they slowly started building that habit. It's that same thing with anything in life when it comes to building a habit. You have to break through that initial wall, that couple weeks, really couple months period of kind of like embracing the suck. And then all of a sudden it's a habit and you start enjoying it. I promise you that you can learn to love running. I think that every single person on earth can and should learn to love running. I can't tell you how many people in the gym that I lift with that I lift the same amount, if not more weight than them, are like, oh my gosh, running is not for me. I'm a bodybuilder person. Well, sure. But I promise you, if you started small enough and you ran slow enough, you would feel a lot better. You would have a lot healthier heart. You would experience more joy being out in nature and getting more sunlight and getting more steps in. I am super passionate about running, and I think that everyone can do it. You just have to start with less distance and running slower, and I promise you, you will build up over time. So it's time for you and me to wake up and lead.